We've a genuine new thrill in store for you, Mr. Rainsford. Thank you. I'm a hunter, not a murderer. Dear me, said the general, quite unruffled. Again, that unpleasant word. But I think I can show you that your scruples are quite ill-founded. Yes, life is for the strong, to be lived by the strong, and if need be, taken by the strong. The weak of the world were put here to give the strong pleasure. I am strong. Why should I not use my gift? If I wish to hunt, why should I not? I hunt the scum of the earth, sailors from tramp ships, Lascars, blacks, Chinese, whites, mongrels. A thoroughbred horse or hound is worth more than a score of them. But they are men, said Rainsford hotly. Precisely, said the general. That is why I use them. It gives me pleasure. They can reason after a fashion, so they are dangerous. Where do you get them? The general's left eyelid fluttered down in a wink. This island is called Ship Trap, he answered. Sometimes an angry god of the high seas sends them to me. Sometimes when Providence is not so kind, I help Providence a bit. Come to the window with me. Rainsford went to the window and looked out toward the sea. Watch. Out there, exclaimed the general, pointing into the night. Rainsford's eyes saw only blackness, and then, as the general pressed a button, far out to sea, Rainsford saw the flash of lights. The general chuckled. They indicate a channel, he said, where there's none. Giant rocks with razor edges crouch like a sea monster with wide open jaws. They can crush a ship as easily as I crush this nut. He dropped a walnut on the hardwood floor and brought his heel grinding down on it. Oh, yes, he said casually, as if in answer to a question. I have electricity. We try to be civilized here. Civilized? And you shoot down men? A trace of anger was in the general's black eyes, but it was there for but a second, and he said, in his most pleasant manner, Dear me, what a righteous young man you are. I assure you, I do not do the thing you suggest. That would be barbarous. I treat these visitors with every consideration. They get plenty of good food and exercise. They get into splendid physical condition. You shall see for yourself tomorrow. What do you mean? We'll visit my training school, smiled the general. It's in the cellar. I have about a dozen pupils down there now. They're from the Spanish bark, San Lucar, that had the bad luck to go on the rocks out there. A very inferior lot, I regret to say. Poor specimens, and more accustomed to the deck than to the jungle. He raised his hand, and Ivan, who served as waiter, brought thick Turkish coffee. Rainsford, with an effort, held his tongue in check. It's a game, you see, pursued the general blandly. I suggest to one of them that we go hunting. I give him a supply of food and an excellent hunting knife. I give him 3 hours' start. I am to follow, armed only with a pistol of the smallest caliber and range. If my quarry eludes me for 3 whole days, he wins the game. If I find him, the general smiled, he loses. Suppose he refuses to be hunted? Oh, said the general. I give him this option, of course. He need not play that game if he doesn't wish to. If he does not wish to hunt, I turn him over to Ivan. Ivan once had the honor of serving as official Nauta to the great white Tsar, and he has his own ideas of sport. Invariably, Mr. Rainsford, invariably they choose the hunt. And if they win? The smile on the general's face widened. To date, I have not lost, he said. Then he added hastily, I don't wish you to think me a braggart, Mr. Rainsford. Many of them afford only the most elementary sort of problem. Occasionally I strike a Tartar. One almost did win. I eventually had to use the dogs. The dogs? This way, please. I'll show you. The general steered Rainsford to a window. The lights from the windows sent a flickering illumination that made grotesque patterns on the courtyard below, and Rainsford could see moving about there a dozen or so huge black shapes. As they turned toward him, their eyes glittered greenly. A rather good lot, I think, observed the general. They are let out at 7 every night. If anyone should try to get into my house, or out of it, something extremely regrettable would occur to him. He hummed a snatch of song from the Folie Bergère. And now, said the general, I want to show you my new collection of heads. Will you come with me to the library? I hope, said Rainsford, that you will excuse me tonight, General Zaroff. I'm really not feeling at all well. Ah, indeed, the general inquired solicitously. Well, I suppose that's only natural after your long swim. You need a good, restful night's sleep. Tomorrow you feel like a new man, I'll wager. Then we'll hunt, eh? I've one rather promising prospect. Rainsford was hurrying from the room. Sorry you can't go with me tonight, called the general. I expect rather fair sport. A big, strong black. He looks resourceful. Well, good night, Mr. Rainsford. I hope you have a good night's rest.
Now let's pause for a moment and let's go back to the beginning of the story. This is a good breaking point for us. And let's now start to pay attention to the ways in which tension is going to be developed in this story. Now, to this point, really think about it, only 2 things have happened. I mean, think about this. We'll speak at the large first for your notes at level 1. Notice only 2 things have happened. In terms of setting, we've only had 2 projects. 1, we've been on a boat, a yacht, right? 2, we've spent some time in this mansion with this crazy lunatic of a guy named Zaroff. That's really all that's happened. But notice that Connell is trying to develop something here in terms of the struggle or the conflict. Note the ironies, at 2B, write this down. Note the ironies that are constantly a part of this story. Now, you're far enough into the story to realize, this is a story about a guy that lives on an island and hunts people. It is really that simple. To this point, we realize this is a story about a guy who used to enjoy hunting animals, but he got so bored with it because he never found an animal he couldn't kill that he had to invent a new kind of animal to hunt, and that animal for him was a human being. What made that such a challenge for him was human beings have reason, capacity to think, and in that regards, of course, we're going to get into some interesting discussions. Notice right away, we begin with the opening lines of the story. I'm with you now on page 215. Work with me now quickly through this text, all right? Notice that we've got, right off the bat, this notion of ship, trap, island. Note the ironies already. The word trap will only make sense to us later in the story when we go, why this island is a trap. We'll begin to understand. Notice that there's this notion of superstition that's mentioned as well. Notice we're told by Whitney that Rainsford's had good eyes, and we're going to find out that, of course, Rainsford is a great hunter. We're in the Caribbean in an ocean, right? Notice the expectation is we'll have some good sport. Notice good hunting up in the Amazon. I'm on page 215. Read it with me. Notice the best sport in the world, agreed Rainsford. For the hunter, amended Whitney, not the jaguar. Let's make a point right away. Already, we're beginning to get a debate that will start to develop. That is to say, is it fun for the animal being hunted? Now, for anybody who's ever hunted, this is always a question. To what degree is it fun for the elk? Because it may be fun for the person holding a rifle, but is it fun for the elk that's being chased or hunted? And here, notice the response, right? Don't talk rot, Whitney, said Rainsford. Now, let's just go ahead and put it in our notes at 2B. And this is the reason we stopped the text where we stopped the text. Note the genius of this text. We are going to have another conversation between two men later in the story, yes? Where their debate will be, what's fair hunting? Here we have this question about fair hunting. Notice Whitney, he says, well, it just doesn't seem very fair that you get to hunt a jaguar because you got a rifle and clearly the jaguar doesn't have a rifle. The counter answer could be, well, yeah, but look at what the jaguar's got. The jaguar's got his speed. The jaguar's got his strength. The jaguar's very cunning. And of course, ultimately, the jaguar can kill you with his claws or whatever. Of course it's fair. Notice here, though, the observation is, you're a big game hunter, said Rainsford, not a philosopher. Who cares how a jaguar feels? Jot down in your notes what's ironic about that line coming from Rainsford. You already know what's about to happen. Rainsford's going to end up on an island where he, Rainsford, the great hunter Rainsford, the man who even writes books about hunting, Rainsford, is ultimately going to become the jaguar, the hunted. That's where the story is going, right? We'll, of course, get there. Perhaps the jaguar does, says Whitney. They've got no understanding, the response on page 216. And then there's this mention of fear. And then this notion of the two classes. Read it with me on page 216. Nonsense, laughed Rainsford. This hot weather's making you soft, Whitney. Be a realist. Can we say this out loud? Rainsford here is playing the same role that Zaroff will play in just a few pages, when Zaroff and Rainsford are going to have a conversation. In fact, now that I'm pointing this out to you, some of you are already ready to write down the very argument that Rainsford gives here to Whitney is the exact same argument that Zaroff will give to Rainsford here in a few moments. Take a look at it. The world is made up of two classes. I would write this down. Here's one of our first interesting ideas. And of course, this is a story. And can I put this out? One of the reasons why this is a great story is not just that it's an adventure story. It can easily be turned into a movie, and it has, where you obviously have one man hunting another man. But this is a story that will kind of begin to challenge you. Is it the case at Worland High School there are two classes of people? Take a look at it. Now I'm reading on page 216. Two classes of people. Or there are two classes. The world is made up of two classes. The hunters and the huntees. Put it in your notes at 3A. Later, when you're a senior, we're going to read an English writer named William Blake, who writes two different kinds of poems. Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. In Songs of Innocence, he'll talk about a beautiful lamb. A tiny, cuddly, cute little lamb. In the other Songs of Experience, he'll write about a tiger. Of course, what happens if you put a tiger and a lamb together in a cage? The argument, and this is what we call archetypes, the argument is that in the world there are two kinds of, basically, humans. There are lambs, and there are tigers. There are the hunted, and there's the huntee. That's the way the world divides. By the way, without pointing it out, without saying it, what's Rainsford actually saying about himself? I am the what? Yeah, right, I'm the hunted. I'm the hunter, right? I'm the hunter. I'm the big game hunter. What do I care about huntees? I mean, it doesn't really matter. The world is divided into two. I am one, I'm not the other. Again, we're already seeing, whoa, this is kind of genius the way this story's set up. Because here in a little bit, we're going to have a conversation with Zaroff. He's going to say the exact same thing. If the world is made up of hunters and huntees, then how come humans can't hunt humans? The argument will be, well, it's not morally right. Which, by the way, of course, raises the question about hunting anything. Is it ever morally right? What makes it right to be able to hunt an animal and not to hunt the animal, man? Because isn't man a mammal? This will be Zaroff's argument, right? All set up here at the beginning, right? Notice then there's this strange feeling, a sudden chill. We'll now move quickly back to the word superstition on page 216. And then there's this interesting sense that evil on page 217 is almost tangible. Put it in your notes. We will ask this question. Is Zaroff evil? Is he evil? And if he is evil, what makes him evil? Right? We'll continue, of course, with the end of the exchange. You then have the darkness, you then have the abruptness, and you have a gun firing. And of course, this, notice the irony, will lead Rainsford, because the minute he hears the crack of a pistol, he knows firearms, right? Because he's been around them all his life. And the minute he hears about a pistol, he immediately is ready on page 217 to jump up on the railing of the yacht to try and see what's going on. Can we point it out? It's almost like it's sport for him. Dude, I hear a gun, right? The minute I hear a gun, I'm like, whoa, 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 what's up with that? He wants to see. Can I see? Can I see? Of course, his trying to see, ironically, leads to his falling. Notice the description, the last line on page 217. I'm trying to point out the genius of this piece of text. Last line on 217, the blood-warm waters. Write down what's interesting about the fact that the waters of the Caribbean are described as blood-warm. Notice on 2:18 we have our first struggle. If this is going to be a text about struggling, and of course we recognize that it's going to be a text about struggling, it's a text about struggling that begins with Rainsford now, who could drown now that he's in the water. Right? Right away his first struggle will lead to this swimming. Right? Of course, he's going to have to swim. He's going to have to conserve his strength. He's going to hear more sounds. Notice all the sounds that we're hearing, right? All the different sounds that are taught. Then, of course, finally, he makes it onto the shore where he will drag himself up onto the shore, and there he's so exhausted he will go to sleep. By the way, just put it in your notes. This is an allusion, A-L-L-U-S-I-O, reference, A-L-L-U-S-I-O. This is an allusion to one of the most famous stories in all of literature, the story of Odysseus, who will be on a boat and will wreck, and will end up on the island of the Phaeacians, where he will be washed up on. And of course, you've seen this many, many times in movies, haven't you? Where somebody almost dies and then ends up on the shore. Of course, we've said this already in other lectures. Let's say it here now. Great writers challenge the reader to ask why. I would write that down. Great writers challenge the reader to ask why. Of course, we will ourselves, as freshmen, be writing a short story for the Young Authors Competition. And we'll challenge you, when you sit down to do that, challenge your reader to ask why. Or, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next, right? And of course, here he is. Now, he's made it. He's safe. His first survival has happened, and he is now safe. Of course, next, he's going to begin to investigate, right? He will begin to figure out, where am I and what has happened? Using his ability as a tracker, because he's a great hunter, he can begin to kind of figure out. Notice all the things he finds. That empty cartridge. Of course, he finds evidence, right? And he's trying to figure out, where am I and what's going on? By the way, deduction is the key here. Let's just point it out. What will make Zaroff want to hunt humans? Think about it. What will make Zaroff want to hunt humans as opposed to hunting jaguars? Right? Which is, by the way, what Rainsford himself was excited to be hunting before he became the hunted, right? Why does he like to hunt humans for Zaroff? Because they can think. I don't understand. What do you mean animals can't think? No. Animals can think. Animals, however, can't reason. I would write this down. This is going to be a major distinction of our story. What's the difference between thinking and deduction reasoning? That's what's going to make for Zaroff. That's what's going to make humans so interesting to hunt. In other words, we're witnessing it. Notice what happens. Okay, I'll give you a classic example from philosophy. Difference between you and a dog. Dog is dying of thirst. You are dying of thirst. You are in the desert. Right? You come up on water. The first instinct of the dog, run and start drinking at the water. The human stands for a second, sees all of the skeletons lying around the water, sees corpses lying around the water, and immediately deduces what? I ain't drinking from this water. Why? Because there's something wrong with this water. And the human does this. Even though I'm dying of thirst, I'm not going to drink from this water. I got to go find another water source. This is a dangerous water source. It will lead to my death. What's the dog do? Drink, die. For Zaroff, that will be the distinction between hunting a jaguar and hunting a human. A human has the capacity of deduction, and that's exactly what Rainsford is doing now. Our storyteller, our author here, is setting us up, isn't he? Right? Then we see lights. Then, of course, we have this foreshadowing. Let's write it down in our notes on page 220. We have a series of events that are, of course, going to foreshadow. Now, again, let's get that in our notes, because we're going to hear this one again and again. Foreshadowing is when something happens in the story, you only understand it usually as foreshadowing after the story is concluded. For example, take a look. He walks up to this huge house in the middle of the woods with all these lights. And there's this gargoyle on the door. But notice we're told that the door, it's like the door knocker, hasn't been used very often. In other words, we're going to find out later, people don't come to this island to visit. People are brought to this island to be hunted. And yet he's going to knock on the door. And then immediately you get this huge guy that shows up pointing a revolver, but right at his heart. And this huge guy, this hugest of guys, right, is going to set a tone for our story. Whoa! Like, who is this guy? What's going on? Notice 2 times he tells him why he's here. I'm hungry. I need help. Let's point out there's a subtle shift already occurring where Rainsford, the confident hunter, is now all of a sudden beginning to be a little bit unsure. Dude, what kind of island have I come to? And all of a sudden he can't talk to this guy. And then Zaroff enters. Let's look at him on page 221. By the way, Cossacks are mentioned. You can read there in that box on page 221 about the Cossacks and why it's a significant thing that both Ivan as well as Zaroff are Cossacks. That is to say, strong, great hunters, great fighters, right? Immediately, it's fascinating. Note the irony of this. Zaroff knows Rainsford. He doesn't know Rainsford. He knows Rainsford's book. Why? Because Rainsford has written a book on what? Hunting. In other words, Rainsford knows hunting the way Zaroff knows hunting, as both an intellectual activity, I've read a book about it,